The girl in the hallway, what happened that night still haunts me. I don't even know if it was real or if my mind was just trying to protect me from the truth. But deep down, I know something was there. Something that should never have existed. The hallway was always just a hallway, a narrow passage between my room and the living room, lit by a flickering yellow light. Nothing about it should have scared me. But after that night, the simple act of looking into that darkness became a burden. I never believed in those stories. I was always the type who needed to see to believe. The supernatural, to me, was the stuff of bad movies and urban legends people tell to scare children. I laughed at those who claimed to have seen something, felt a presence, or heard unexplained voices. But sometimes, reality doesn't need our permission to impose itself. And that night, it forced me to believe. The first thing I noticed was the feeling that something was wrong. Have you ever felt that? That uncomfortable impression that someone is watching you, even when you know you're alone. My apartment was completely silent, but still, there was something there. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a shadow. It was just a presence. Invisible but overwhelming. I tried to ignore it. I turned on the TV, turned up the volume, focused on the movie that was playing. But my gaze kept drifting stubbornly to the dark hallway. Something inside me insisted, "Look again." And that's when I saw it. A shadow, a motionless silhouette right in the middle of the hallway, between the light of the living room and the darkness of my bedroom. My heart stopped. My eyes blinked once, twice. It couldn't be, but it was there. A girl, standing completely still. Her long hair hid her face. Her light dress seemed dirty, stained with something I didn't want to identify. I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind was torn between absolute terror and the desperate need to find a rational explanation. But there was no explanation. I blinked again, and she was closer. My body froze. My heart, which had been racing, seemed to have stopped beating. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. The girl was closer, but I hadn't seen her move. It was impossible. My eyes had been open the whole time. I hadn't blinked for more than a second, and yet she was there, now just a few steps away from the entrance to the living room. My breathing became irregular. My mind screamed that I was imagining things, that maybe it was a trick of the shadows, a trick of my tired mind. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't it, because I could feel it. The room was freezing. The air around me felt heavy, as if sucked into some invisible vacuum. My ears were ringing, and the only thing I could hear was silence. But not a normal silence. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, as if something was waiting, watching. My hand was shaking. I grabbed the remote and pressed the TV button repeatedly, trying to bring some normality to the moment. The sound of the movie exploded in the room, voices and sound effects filling the space. But the girl was still there. Then she tilted her head, a small, subtle movement, as if she were curious, as if she were trying to understand why I was so scared. My legs wanted to run. Every instinct inside me screamed to get up, run to the bedroom, lock the door, and pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't move. That's when I saw it. Her feet weren't touching the ground. My stomach turned. A chill ran down my spine, as if liquid ice had been injected directly into my veins. I wanted to scream, but my voice simply wouldn't come out. Then, the TV turned off by itself. The screen went black, and for a moment, my own reflection appeared in the dark glass. But I wasn't alone. Behind me, just inches away, was the girl. Before I could react, the reflection smiled. But it wasn't my smile. It was hers. And I knew in that moment that this wasn't a dream. This was real. And I was no longer safe in my own home. I jumped off the couch. My body acted before my mind could process. The remote fell to the floor with a dull thud, but I barely noticed. I turned around in a panic, my chest heaving, my eyes wide. The hallway was empty. There was no one behind me. The silence was still there, heavy, pulsating, almost suffocating. My legs were trembling. My throat was dry. My ears were ringing with the frantic beat of my own heart. But I knew she was still there. Maybe I couldn't see her. Maybe I couldn't hear her. But something in the air, something in the atmosphere of the room had changed. It was as if reality itself was distorted. I swallowed hard, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then, the hallway light flickered. Once, twice, and in that brief moment of darkness between the flashes of light, I saw it. Her shadow, still standing there between the living room and the hallway, motionless. The light came back, and the hallway was empty again. My body froze for a moment. My mind fought against logic, trying to find a rational explanation, but nothing made sense. I felt my stomach churn. Everything in me said I needed to get out of there. Slowly, with my body stiff, I walked to the front door. My hands were sweaty as I touched the doorknob. I was going to leave. Go anywhere. Anywhere would be safer than here. But the doorknob didn't move. It was locked. My heart raced. I never locked this door from the inside. Never. I turned the knob again, harder. Nothing. And then I felt it. Behind me, a breath. Short, weak, but close enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Every muscle in my body tensed. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't turn around. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe desperation, forced me to do it. Slowly, I turned my head, inch by inch, the fear rising like poison in my chest. And there she was, less than a foot away from me, close enough that I could smell the damp, strange odor of something that shouldn't be there. Her long hair covered her face, but through the dark strands, I saw something. Eyes. Not normal eyes. Not human eyes. They were empty, black as the bottom of a bottomless pit. And then she whispered a single word, low, almost inaudible, but clear enough to make me want to scream. Stay. My entire body went numb. The air seemed to have been sucked from my lungs, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at that thing standing in front of me. Stay. The word still vibrated in my skull like a distorted echo, a silent command my brain refused to process. My instinct screamed to run. Run now. But where? The door was locked. The hallway. I didn't even want to think about what might be waiting there. The girl remained motionless, her face still hidden by her hair, her head slightly tilted as if waiting for an answer. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was about to explode. My body was shaking uncontrollably. But then, something worse happened. The corners of her mouth opened, not like a normal smile, not like anything human. Her skin stretched unnaturally, tearing at an impossible angle, as if her mouth was being pulled upward by invisible hooks. Her lips split, revealing teeth, too many teeth, sharp, thin, too many to fit in a normal mouth. And I realized she wasn't waiting for an answer. She was waiting for me to understand. I had no choice. My mind panicked without thinking. I threw myself backward, stumbling and falling to the floor with a dull thud. She didn't move, but her eyes, they followed me, and then the lights flickered again. For a second, I saw everything around me swallowed by darkness, and when the light returned, she was gone. My chest heaved. I looked around, dazed, my entire body on high alert. The silence in the apartment was even worse now, as if something was waiting, as if the air itself was holding its breath with me. The doorknob. I crawled across the floor, my fingers trembling as I grabbed it. Now, I needed to get out now. But before I could turn it, the phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. Shrill, unexpected. I turned to look. The cell phone was on the coffee table, the screen flashing in the dark. Unknown number. My guts churned. Everything inside me said not to answer. But, like a prisoner of my own morbid curiosity, my hand moved on its own. I grabbed the phone, pressed the green button, and held it to my ear. Silence. Nothing. No breathing. No background noise. Just suffocating silence. Then, after a moment, the voice came. Low, hoarse, terribly familiar. It was my voice. She's still there. The phone fell from my hand. And before I could react, before I could run, escape, do anything, the light went out. and someone whispered right next to my ear, "Stay." The darkness swallowed me. Not like the simple absence of light. It was a living darkness, dense, almost tangible. Something in it seemed to surround me, envelop me, as if it had weight. The silence was no longer silence. There was something in it, something breathing. I wanted to move. I needed to move, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if something was holding my muscles, keeping me trapped there, paralyzed, just listening. Then I felt it. Not a touch, not a visible presence, but a cold brush against the back of my neck. Her breath, and then the light returned. My lungs felt like they were about to burst as I pulled air back in, choking like someone who had just emerged from underwater. I was alone in the living room, or at least it seemed that way. But something had changed. The phone was still on the floor, the screen flickering uselessly. The hallway, once empty, now seemed darker, as if the darkness wasn't just the absence of light, but something active, something that crawled, that fed on the shadows themselves. I couldn't stay there any longer. I remembered the locked door and turned to it, but it was open, slightly ajar. The crack revealing the building's hallway outside, the dim light from the hall illuminating a small part of the entrance. My mind was spinning. I had locked it. I was sure of it. But at that moment, nothing made sense anymore. The only thing I knew was that I needed to get out. I took a hesitant step toward the door. My body was still trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. But every cell in my being said I couldn't stay another second there. That's when I heard it. A creak behind me, slow, as if something was dragging itself. My back stiffened, my stomach turned. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. I swallowed hard, and with every fiber of my being screaming for me to run, turned my head just enough to see the living room out of the corner of my eye, and my blood ran cold. The TV was on, but there was no sound, just a black screen. And in the reflection of the screen, I saw her, behind me, standing motionless, the same position, the hair covering her face, the dirty dress. But now, something was different. Her mouth was open, not just open, wide open, as if she were screaming, but there was no sound. And then the hallway light went out, and I was pulled back into the darkness. The world spun around me. My body was pulled with a force that shouldn't exist. There were no hands holding me, nothing physical that could justify it. But I felt it. Something was dragging me backward. The darkness swallowed me like a dense, suffocating wave. My scream got stuck in my throat, my skin prickling as if I had plunged into an ice-cold pool. The floor disappeared. For a moment, there was no more gravity, no time, no space. Just absolute emptiness. Then suddenly, I was falling. My vision blurred. The impact threw me against something hard. My shoulder hit first, then my hip, and finally my head. The dull thud echoed around as if I were inside a tunnel. The shock left me dazed. My mind oscillated between reality and something beyond it. I was no longer in my living room. I blinked several times, struggling to adjust my eyes to the new darkness around me. My body ached. The smell around me was damp, old, musty. The first thing I noticed was the wooden floor, the hallway. But it wasn't my hallway. The space was narrow, claustrophobic. The walls covered in peeling, dirty wallpaper, as if it belonged to a house abandoned decades ago. My chest rose and fell irregularly, my heart pounding hard. I couldn't be here. This didn't make sense. But before my mind could even try to understand what was happening, the footsteps began, slow, dragging, echoing through the hallway as if someone were walking barefoot on rotten wood. And they were coming toward me. My breath caught. My entire body stiffened. The light was faint, almost non-existent. But in the dimness I saw her silhouette, not running, not attacking, just walking, slowly, as if she knew I had nowhere to run. My mind screamed for me to get up, run, fight, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. The footsteps continued, getting closer. The sound of the wood creaking was almost unbearable. Then a new noise, a whisper, low, scratchy, as if the words were being spat through worn vocal cords. You remember? My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream that no, I didn't know what she was talking about, that none of this made sense. But something inside me, something said yes, that I knew, that I had always known. The truth was there, buried in some forgotten corner of my memory, and now it was resurfacing. The girl stopped a few meters away from me. The silence swallowed everything. Only our invisible eyes stared at each other in the darkness. Then she took one last step, and the light went out. The darkness held me like a bottomless pit. My entire body trembled. My mind spun in panic. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I got there. But something told me this wasn't the first time. Her whisper still echoed in my head. Do you remember? No, I didn't remember. But something inside me knew. My breath caught in my throat when I felt something move near me. Too close. The damp, sour smell of the place grew stronger. The wooden floor creaked under an invisible weight. And then something touched my arm. Cold, dry, like the skin of someone long dead. A shiver ran up my spine, my body reacting before my mind. I threw myself backward, desperate, dragging myself across the old, rotting wooden floor. And that's when I felt it. Behind me, there was a door. My fingers touched the rough wood. My nails dug into the surface, searching for a doorknob, a crack, anything that would get me out of there. The footsteps started again, coming toward me, this time faster. Panic took over me. My fingers finally found a crack in the wood. I pushed. The door opened with an agonizing creak. I fell backward, and before I could look, the light returned, and I was back in my apartment. The living room was the same. The TV was off. The remote was still on the floor. The front door slightly ajar, as if nothing had happened. But I knew it had. My hands were still shaking. My breathing was still heavy. The cold still burned my skin. This was real. And then I looked at the hallway door. It was open and stuck in the wood, carved as if it had been pushed with force, was a mark, a name, written in deep, scratched, trembling letters. My name. I had been there before. And now, she wanted me to remember. The blood drained from my face. My name, carved into the wood of the hallway. My eyes traced the letters, each irregular stroke, as if they had been scratched in haste or desperation. I had been there before. But when? How? My head throbbed. The cold on my skin was no longer just fear. It was something deeper, a memory trying to emerge. I took a hesitant step back, as if the mere proximity of that mark was enough to drag me back to that place. Then the phone rang, the same shrill ringtone, the same unknown number. My heart jumped in my chest. I should have ignored it. I knew I should have. But, like before, my hand moved on its own. I picked up the phone. I answered. The silence on the other end of the line was worse than any sound. And then the voice came. My voice. But not like before. Not a simple warning. This time, my own voice was crying. Please, don't go back. The phone fell from my hand. Please, don't go back. Go back where? To that hallway? To that darkness? Or to the memory I didn't want to have? My eyes returned to the hallway door. It was now fully open. The dark seemed to stretch beyond normal, deeper, as if it wasn't just the end of a hallway, but the beginning of something much worse. And then I felt it, the same cold, the same presence. Behind me, I didn't need to turn around. I knew who it was. She was there, waiting. And for the first time, she didn't whisper. She didn't move. But she did something even worse. She laughed, low, raspy, without joy, just amused, as if she knew something I didn't. And perhaps she always had. I had been there before. And now it was time to remember. Her laughter spread through the room like poison. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. It was worse. It was soft, contained, almost intimate, as if I had heard it before. The sound hit me like an icy shock. My body reacted on its own. I turned too quickly, expecting to see her there, but there was nothing. No shadow, no presence. The hallway was open, dark as a bottomless pit. My skin crawled all over. She was playing with me. I wasn't just being haunted, I was being taunted. I tried to control my breathing. I moved away from the hallway door, my eyes scanning every corner of the apartment, looking for something that would explain what was happening. Then, something caught my attention. The coffee table. The phone, which I had dropped, was no longer on the floor. It was now on the table, and the screen was lit. My throat went dry. I hadn't put it there. And even though every instinct screamed for me not to approach, my legs moved on their own. On the screen, an audio file. No name, no sender, just a recording. My hand trembled as I swiped my finger across the screen and pressed play. The silence lasted a few seconds. Then the sound came. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened. The footsteps got closer. Each creak on the floor seemed closer. Closer. Then the sound stopped. And a whisper. But it wasn't her voice. It was mine. Low. Trembling. As if I were there. As if I had recorded it. Don't look back. The blood froze in my veins. A breath behind me. Cold. Low. Slow. I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around. But then, the phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a sharp crack. The screen went black, and before I could react, the light flickered. For a second, just a second, I saw her in the reflection of the TV. Behind me, closer than ever. And now I remembered, not everything, not clearly, but something inside me broke. Like a crack in a mirror, a fragment of truth appeared through the fog of my mind. And that was worse than not remembering anything. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes were glued to the black screen of the TV. I saw her, for a second, long enough, the motionless silhouette, the dark hair covering her face, the dirty dress. But this time, there was something different. Before I could understand, the TV turned on by itself. The screen hissed, static cutting through the silence. The image flickered, and then a video appeared of a hallway. Not just any hallway, my hallway. The recording shook as if it had been made by someone holding the phone with trembling hands. The time was stamped on the screen, but it didn't make sense. The date was from years ago. My stomach turned. The video showed someone walking down the dark hallway. The floor creaked with each step. The lighting was low, but I recognized the place. Then the camera turned around, and there she was, standing motionless at the end of the hallway. But she wasn't standing. She was floating. My hand trembled violently. The phone screen kept playing the video nonstop. The video became unstable, as if the person filming had started trembling more. The sound of rapid breathing filled the microphone. And then the voice. My voice. This can't be happening. I held my head, reality spinning around me. I had seen this scene before. I had recorded this video. Before I could react, the video jumped abruptly. The static grew louder. And then the final scene. The screen filled with a close-up of the girl. But now, her face was visible, and the sight paralyzed me. The gray skin, cracked like old porcelain. The dark, sunken eyes, no pupils. The mouth opened too wide, as if the flesh had split. The small, sharp teeth. And then, she smiled, and whispered, "You've been here before." The screen went black. The TV turned off by itself. And behind me, the floor creaked. I remembered, not everything, not clearly, but something inside me broke. Like a crack in a mirror, a fragment of truth appeared through the fog of my mind. And that was worse than not remembering anything. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes were glued to the black screen of the TV. I saw her, for a second, long enough, the motionless silhouette, the dark hair covering her face, the dirty dress. But this time, there was something different. Before I could understand, the TV turned on by itself. The screen hissed, static cutting through the silence. The image flickered, And then a video appeared of a hallway, not just any hallway, my hallway. The recording shook as if it had been made by someone holding a phone with trembling hands. The time was stamped on the screen, but it didn't make sense. The date was from years ago. My stomach turned. The video showed someone walking down the dark hallway. The floor creaked with each step. The lighting was low, but I recognized the place. Then the camera turned around, and there she was, standing motionless at the end of the hallway. But she wasn't standing. She was floating. My hand trembled violently. The phone screen kept playing the video nonstop. The video became unstable, as if the person filming had started trembling more. The sound of rapid breathing filled the microphone. And then the voice. My voice. This can't be happening. I held my head, reality spinning around me. I had seen this scene before. I had recorded this video. Before I could react, the video jumped abruptly. The static grew louder. And then the final scene. The screen filled with a close-up of the girl. But now, her face was visible, and the sight paralyzed me. The gray skin, cracked like old porcelain. The dark, sunken eyes, no pupils. The mouth opened too wide, as if the flesh had split. The small, sharp teeth. And then she smiled and whispered, "You've been here before." The screen went black. The TV turned off by itself. And behind me, the floor creaked. The floor creaked. A faint sound, but loaded with an overwhelming presence. My body stiffened. My muscles locked as if they were made of stone. She was behind me. I could feel it. That damp cold crawling over my skin. That soundless breath brushing the back of my neck. My mind screamed for me not to move, not to look. But I remembered. And now, I knew why I shouldn't have remembered. My mouth was dry, my throat locked. But I managed to swallow hard, forcing my body to move 1 millimeter at a time. With superhuman effort, I lowered my eyes and saw her feet, less than a foot away. They weren't touching the ground, and they were facing me. She was standing, waiting. The electricity in the air was suffocating. My heart felt like it was about to explode. Time stopped. Then she moved, a cracking sound, as if every bone was dislocating. Slowly, painfully slowly, her head tilted to the side. And then she whispered, "You know what you did?" My blood froze. No, I didn't know. But something inside me wanted to remember. Something I had buried so deep that my mind rejected the truth. The world spun around me. My breathing became short, desperate. She knew. She had always known. And now, she wanted me to know too. My legs trembled, my vision blurred. But before I could do anything, a violent pain exploded in my head, and everything went black. I woke up with a metallic taste in my mouth. My body was limp. My head throbbed as if it had been crushed from the inside. I blinked several times, trying to orient myself. And then I saw I was no longer in my living room. I was in the hallway. But not my hallway. Not anymore. The walls were peeling. The smell of dampness filled the air. The floor creaked under my own weight. And there in front of me was the door. Locked. Old. Dark wood. But with something carved into it. My name. And a date. Exactly 10 years ago. My stomach turned. My chest tightened. I had been here before. And now there was no escape. The hallway seemed to stretch infinitely. I knew it was impossible. My apartment wasn't like this. But there, in front of that door, the space twisted, stretched, as if I were trapped in something that was no longer real. My breathing was short. My chest rose and fell in a frantic rhythm. The date carved into the door. 10 years ago. My mind spun. I didn't remember anything from that period. It was a void. A thick fog covering any attempt to recover the memories. But one thing I knew, I shouldn't open that door. The problem? It began to open by itself, though it creaked in a deep, sickly sound, as if resisting its own movement. A dark crack formed, revealing nothing but darkness on the other side. My fingers clenched into fists. My feet rooted to the floor. I didn't want to see what was there. But, like everything in this cursed night, I had no choice. The door opened completely, and behind it, there was a room. The shock coursed through my body like a lightning bolt. The room wasn't strange. It was my room, but not as it was now, as it was 10 years ago. The same bed, the same posters on the wall, the books scattered on the floor, the worn furniture, the details I had long forgotten. My eyes widened. The air seemed to suffocate, heavy like liquid cement in my lungs. This couldn't be happening, but it was. I took a hesitant step inside. The smell of dust and old invaded my nostrils. And then I saw it, the phone, on the dresser, the same old model I used back then. The screen was lit, with a notification blinking. A video. My fingers tingled. My legs trembled. I didn't want to see. But, like a prisoner of my own morbid curiosity, my hand reached out. I picked up the phone. The touch of the cold plastic against my fingers felt more real than anything else there. The notification blinked insistent. I pressed play. The recording began. The image shook. The video showed the same room, filmed from inside it, as if someone were there recording. My eyes were glued to the screen. My breath was caught. The recording showed the bed, the window, the door slightly ajar, and then a sound, breathing, low, and it wasn't mine. The video cut abruptly. Now, the camera was pointed at the mirror, and in the reflection, I was there, holding the phone, exactly like now, except behind me, she was there too, standing in the hallway, floating, her head tilted, the stained dress, her face hidden, until, in the video, she lifted her face, and, for the first time, I saw her eyes, empty, black, but full of hate. Then the screen went black, and a message appeared on the phone. You know what you did. The phone slipped from my fingers, and behind me, the wood of the door creaked. Someone was there, breathing, waiting, and now, I remembered. I knew what I had done, and she would never let me forget. The air was thick, heavy with something invisible pressing down on me, as if cold hands were closing around my chest. The door behind me creaked again. I didn't need to look. I knew she was there. The smell of old wood, of something damp and wrong, mixed with the dust in the room. My mind spun. The message on the phone still burned in my retina. You know what you did. And now I really knew. The fragment of memory that had been hidden in a dark corner of my mind opened like an old wound, pulsating, painful. What happened 10 years ago, I should never have forgotten. But I did, or wanted to forget. My fingers trembled as I leaned on the dresser. My legs felt weak, as if the weight of the truth was more than I could bear. I had been here before. I had seen this girl before. And that night, she died. Because of me. The memory hit me like a punch to the chest. I was in this same room. Younger, more naive, more cruel. The hallway door opened. Her shadow standing there, hesitant, scared. I remember the sound. The wood of the floor creaking as she fell. The dull impact. The silence that followed. And the fear of being guilty. The fear of having seen something that couldn't be undone. And then I left. I ran away. I erased. I blocked. I buried that memory so deep that, for years, I convinced myself it never happened. But she never forgot. She never let me forget. The low laugh echoed behind me. The sound was different now. No longer a joke. No longer a game. This time it was anger. Pure hatred. Tears burned in my eyes. My chest rose and fell in desperation. I'm sorry. My voice came out shaky, choked. I didn't know. But the laughter stopped, and her voice came, low, whispered, icy. You knew. The light in the room flickered violently. The air grew heavier, as if the house itself was closing in on me. Then the mirror shattered, all at once, and in the shattered glass, I saw her, now without a shadow, without a veil. Her face was all there, The pale skin, the sunken eyes, the jagged cut on her neck, the pale lips whispering words I couldn't understand. She was coming back, and I had nowhere left to run. The shattered glass reflected a face I wished I had never seen. The sunken, too dark eyes, the jagged cut in the skin, the mark of what happened that night. And now, she was coming back. My lungs burned. My body trembled so much I could barely stand. There was nowhere left to run. The light flickered once more, casting grotesque shadows on the walls of the room. Her laughter was no longer a distant sound. Now it was in my head, inside me, part of me, and then the door closed by itself. The slam made my chest vibrate. The entire room seemed to tremble, and the silence came. The worst silence of all, not the usual silence. The silence loaded with expectation. She was waiting. My skin tingled. My vision began to blur. And then I felt her, not just near, inside, as if my body no longer belonged to me. My vision darkened for a second, and when it returned, I was no longer in the room. I was in the hallway. Not mine. Hers. The same hallway from a video. The same hallway from the past. The hallway where it all happened. My feet were heavy. The air around me was thick, sticky, as if I were submerged in something that didn't want to let me go. And there she was, at the end of the hallway, waiting. This time, she wasn't standing still. She was walking toward me, slow, dragging, and I couldn't move. The floor seemed to have swallowed me. My legs wouldn't obey. My mouth wanted to scream, but there was no voice. Her footsteps were the only sound. And then I remembered everything. The fight, the push, the scream I tried to forget, and the dull sound of her body hitting the floor. I killed her. My head throbbed, my vision blurred. And when I blinked, she was already in front of me. Her face was pressed against mine. The sunken eyes devouring me. The smell of rotting flesh filled my nose. And for the first time, she wasn't smiling. Her lips moved slowly, and she whispered, "Now it's your turn." The lights flickered one last time, and I was pulled into the darkness. The darkness swallowed me. This time, there was no resistance. No fight. No chance of escape. Just a void. Time ceased to exist. I don't know how long I was there, trapped in that nothingness, feeling the weight of something I couldn't see, but was everywhere. And then, I woke up, my eyes opened slowly. The air was thick, cold. I was back in my room. The faint light from the street came through the window. The TV was off. Everything was normal. Too normal. My breathing was short. My heart was still pounding in my chest. I got up slowly. My body was shaking. Everything seemed exactly the same as before. But something was wrong. The silence around me was false. As if the entire house was holding its breath. I looked at the hallway door. It was closed. And for a moment, I thought it was all over. But then, something made me freeze. The TV turned on by itself. The screen hiss flickered, and a video started playing. The image shook, as if someone was holding the phone with trembling hands. It was my room. Now, but in the corner of the screen, there she was, standing in the hallway, floating, her head tilted, her face watching me, my lungs locked, my mouth open to scream. But before any sound could come out, the screen went black. And then, 3 sharp knocks on the hallway door. Knock, knock, knock. The air grew heavy. Her breathing, I could hear it. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I knew the truth. She had never left. And now, she was waiting. Knock, knock, knock. The light flickered one last time. And everything went dark.